Good evening, everybody, and welcome into the Civic Awareness. There's my last panelist. Welcome into the Civic Awareness Series with the Schaumburg Library and the League of Women Voters of the Palatine Area. My name is Chris. I am your adult programs coordinator here at the library, and I'm so excited to be spending this evening with you, kicking off June as one of our panelists rightly described it, kind of a whole month of celebrating a lot of different freedoms. Um, and I think we're going to tackle a lot of that tonight as we tackle our panel topic. Um, I don't want to take any more time from our panelists than I already have, so just some quick friendly Zoom reminders. Remember that your cameras and microphones have been turned off. So if you are looking to get in contact with myself because you're having a technical issue, or if you have a question for one of our panelists, make sure you submit those through the Q&A feature in the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. We'll be monitoring that throughout the program. And then we have closed captions enabled for your convenience. You can turn those on or off as you wish from that Zoom toolbar as well. And the chat is active. You're welcome to talk to each other throughout the program if you would like. But again, if you want a question asked, make sure you use that Q&A because sometimes we can lose things in the chat. Without further ado, I would like to turn the evening over to Terry Gazowski and Janet Sonoyka from the League of Women Voters of the Palatine Area. Enjoy, everybody.
Thanks, Chris. Hello, my name's Terry Gazowski, League of Women Voters, Palatine Area Co-Events Director, along with Janet Sonoyka, who is my co-director partner, and she'll be leading today's session on diversity, inclusion in politics and policy. We're happy to partner with Chris and the Schaumburg Library on the Civic Awareness Series, and especially this topic to celebrate June Pride Month and Juneteenth. We thought it was most appropriate to have this conversation and learn a little bit more about it. And our panelists in representing portions. A little bit about the League is that it's a nonpartisan political organization. Anyone can join or support the League in our mission of promoting civic engagement, voter education, and advocacy on various issues. You can learn more about the League and participation through the website that I'll place in the chat. We are over 100 years old, but welcome the energy of all ages and genders. And so, to be brief, I will hand this over to Janet, and she can give us some intros and roles of our honored guests tonight. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Terry. Thanks, Chris, for all the intros. Panelists, if you want to start turning on your cameras, I'm going to give some brief intros and give you an opportunity to add any details you'd like yourself, and then we can get into our discussion for this evening. So thank you all for joining us today. With us, we have several our panelists from different backgrounds and professions. With us today, we have Representative LaShawn Ford, who was elected in 2007 to the Illinois House of Representatives, representing the 8th District. It's just some background. He's got a bachelor's from Loyola University of Chicago, a former Chicago public school teacher, still certified, licensed real estate broker and insurance agent, chair of the House of Democratic Task Force to increase state government businesses and opportunities for minority-owned enterprises and small businesses, chair of the Firearm Public Awareness Task Force, co-founder of Westside Heroin Task Force, the 2018 Nelson Mandela Award for Justice honoree from Westside Health Authority in recognition of tireless service and outstanding contributions in fostering peace and fighting for justice on the west side of Chicago, and has been a representative since 2007. We also, yes, I hope I got all of that. Additionally, we have Gina Roxas from the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation is the executive director. Gina Roxas is of the Fish Clan and an enrolled member of the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation. She has studied the environment through a multifaceted lens of traditional teachings from her grandmother and family elders, as well as humanities and science. Gina brings her knowledge and experience to plan, develop, and oversee the implementation and evaluation of programs that Trickster offers to our community. Gina also manages and facilitates programs that centers traditional plant knowledge as it relates to healing, environmental justice, and self-determination. And then we also have the Honorable Crystal Lynn Larson, who is a clerk for Avon Township in Lake County. Crystal Lynn Larson is the executive director of the LGBTQ+ Center in Lake County. So it's an organization committed to making Lake County a place for LGBTQ plus identifying persons and their families, and a place to feel welcome and thrive in their personal and professional lives. She blends her passion for social impact, lived queer experiences, and sound business expertise to increase the visibility, awareness, of and within the community. So she focuses on advocacy, education to bring greater understanding of the LGBTQ plus community to the people of Lake County while providing support to her peers. And as a clerk for the Avon Township, Crystal serves as the first openly transgender elected official in Lake County, and one of less than 100 nationwide. So quite the resumes from everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today on our discussion for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we can go through you all real quick if there's anything you wanted to add that I didn't bring attention to before we begin our discussion. So Representative Ford, if you'd like to add anything to your bona fides.
No, only thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for being inclusive.
Great, thank you. Honorable Crystal Lynn Larson.
No, I think you summed everything up very well. I'm just happy to be here with my fellow panelists tonight. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Gino.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, I am a citizen of the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation, and I'm the executive director at Trickster Cultural Center. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Gino Roxas. Excellent. So I will get started with this. We have a couple of questions that are designed by the League just to discuss, but we can also go into the Q&A. As Chris mentioned, if you have any questions at any time that you have for our panelists, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A section, and we will pull from them as our discussion continues. But just to kick things off, I would like to ask each one of you, what is your definition of inclusion? As in, what does it look like to be included and the communities that you belong to be included? Representative Ford, if you'd like to get us started.
Janet, I will. It's really good for me to talk about what I think inclusion is. It's what I fight for. So it's the practice that I think that ensures that all individuals, regardless to their backgrounds, identities, or abilities, are valued and respected, and provide equal opportunities to participate and thrive in every setting that they're in. So being included means having a sense of belonging, where one's contributions are recognized and valued, and there are no barriers to participation and successes. All the barriers are removed for success.
Great, thank you. And Ms. Roxas, if you'd like to follow up on that.
Sure, thank you. So inclusion, especially in the Native American community, begins with acknowledgement. A lot of times we're not even acknowledged that we exist, except for in history books, and even that's not in the right light. But acknowledgement that we are still here. Chicagoland is one of the third largest, I believe, U.S. urban Native American community. And we're the fastest growing in this area. And so it starts with acknowledgement first, and then first voice. So being able to tell our story in our voice.
Great, thank you. And Crystal Larson.
So I think being included is really, it's one of those things where for the LGBTQ population to be in places where everybody else is without fear of, being discriminated or chased off or harassed just because of who we are or how we portray ourselves, how we behave, because it's not always the same that, people have traditionally been exposed to. So being able to be in those spaces, to be safe in those spaces, and to be in the rooms where decisions are being made, I think that's incredibly critical to being included in all facets of what we do.
Excellent, great. No, thank you. Those are wonderful, wonderful summaries. And then, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're very big ideas and topics, and they mean a little bit something different to each individual. So what has influenced your specific thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and what has really motivated you to get involved in being this advocate for change and running for these positions? What has that journey looked like for you? And actually, Honorable Larson, if you'd like to start us off this time.
Thank you, Janet. So I think the biggest influence around DEI, what's motivated me the most, is that I spent more than 40 years being, that cisgendered white person in the room and having all of the privilege. And then one day surrendering that and realizing, oh my gosh, I didn't know what I actually had until I gave it up. And so it's a real deep understanding as I've begun to grow in this role to go, we need to make sure that everybody has everything that I had growing up. Like the advantages were just amazing. And I'm glad that I've had this opportunity to be able to leverage some of that privilege that I had as I was growing up, as I was an adult, to be able to transition some of that privilege in the relationships and connections I built to be able to go, hey, let's advocate. Let's use the voices, the people that I've met and the people that I've allied with to start driving that change in a positive way. We've done that with some of my local representatives, including a few years ago with Dan Diddich, where we put together an initiative to change ballot access for transgendered folks and for women by removing the need to post, dead names or divorced names on their petitions and just have to live with that shame or that identity, which was, male centric or, you know, just really invalidated who we are and caused us to rely on those negative experiences and continue to push for those types of things today.
Great. Excellent. Representative Ford, if you'd like to add.
Yeah. So, Janet, my existence, my very existence, when you look at me, who I am, so my thinking around DEI has been shaped by my personal experiences as a teacher, as a individual that looks like me, as a real estate broker that understands the challenges that marginalized communities face through discrimination, through redlining that still takes place. Just witnessing as a representative the systematic inequities and the powerful stories of others that I talk to, whether it's women, whether it's transgender individuals, Black people, women, even young people. One thing that I've learned as a representative, as a teacher, everybody has struggles, and so we all are in it together. So, so the desire to create more just and equitable societies for future generations motivates me to advocate for change. And as long as I'm elected, that's what I'll continue to do. So seeing the positive impact that inclusive policies as a legislator, yeah, I work with people like the League of Women Voters and seeing how those stories come to us and help impact policy reinforces the commitment that I have for this work.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. And same question to you, Mr. Roxas.
Great answers so far. Oh my gosh. I think with me, with DEI, I look to my ancestors, my family, and historically what has been happening in Indian country and the Native American community. June 2nd, we was the 100th year anniversary of the Snyder Act, or the Indian Citizenship Act. We've only been citizens for 100 years, even though we've been on Turtle Island for many thousands of years. And so just looking at what my ancestors have gone through, the struggles they've been put through, I'm a product of their resilience and their strength. And I think our communities intersect. And so we can't uplift ourselves without uplifting each other. And so remembering that and remembering, equitable, not equality, but being equitable really helps me center myself in DEI work.
Excellent. Yeah, as you mentioned, great answers, everybody. That really is at the intersection that we see. When you help one community, you really are helping everyone. Like Honorable Larson mentioned, stuff that's helping with removing dead names from voting also helped women who divorced women who might not have even thought about dead names at all, and it still benefits multiple people in multiple communities. So no, those are excellent points. So in general, it sounds like, we've got a lot of different needs in all of these different communities, and I was hoping that today each of you could share maybe 1 to 2 things that would help, your current community causes, and to meet those goals. So a little bit more in the details of what those immediate goals are, and what are a couple of things that actually help, assist, in moving those forward. So actually, Ms. Roxas, if we can start with you this time.
I think more people that look like us in the panel in leadership positions, and creating that path with education, maybe dismantling some of those barriers to education. I know in the Native community, we really could benefit from more lawyers, more people like us in healthcare. And I think it also in all of our communities that have been marginalized, creating paths for our youth to be able to be in these leadership roles, so that it's just more of a commonality than an anomaly, that we find folks that look like us in leadership.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. And Representative Ford, if there's what 1 to 2
Yeah.
things would you, help your cause that you've been working towards really move
Yeah.
forward?
I think funding for programs, it would be very helpful. I mean, organizations and groups need more money, and it will enhance their ability to implement comprehensive programs and support services. So funding is very important. And secondly, stronger partnerships with local businesses and organizations could provide more opportunities for collaboration. So collaborations are strong and needed in order to bring everyone to the table so that we better understand. So these resource sharings will amplify our impact in our communities.
Excellent. Thank you. And then Honorable Larson, if you'd like to add any, what 1 to 2 things would help, your cause and moving forward there?
I really feel like it's communication. Being able to bring people together. I live in the suburbs up here in Lake County, and while it's a really populous county, we're still really spread out. And so it's just people being able to find their people to be able to get together, to be able to network, to be able to communicate, and to be able to grow equity within their own communities, to be able to build that strength, leverage that strength, and be able to say, hey, look, we're here and we want to do this work. We want to be part of this community, and this is our value. We're just as valuable as every other person here. So that community strengthening and building is just I feel like it's absolutely critical to all of our diverse groups being able to have the appropriate representation and have the people behind it to make that stick.
Yeah, absolutely. And, hopefully, there are more events like this where we can all communicate with each other. And that's excellent. So, representation in leadership positions, communicating, and funding, right? I feel like these are all very intertwined things as well. You need, leadership to ensure that the funding is coming in, and collaborating with those organizations for more communication. That's fantastic. So with these things in mind, and the progress you guys have already made so far, what successful policy initiatives have your organizations or your roles identified concerning EDI issues in the past, and what efforts have you done already to kind of move these things to the forefront? Representative Ford, if you could get started.
Yeah, Janet. So we actually, as a legislature in Springfield, we had the pillars, and it was we dealt with healthcare, dealt with education, we dealt with business opportunities, and we had 4 pillars, and criminal justice. So those are the pillars that, as a caucus and as Democrats, work together to deal with uh, the systematic racisms that we have continued to experience in Illinois.
Yeah, excellent. And then Honorable Larson, if you'd like to list any initiatives that you're currently working on or have worked on, or what's worked in the past, to kind of, open up these communication channels and work on these items?
Yeah, so some of the big ones we've worked on here have been things like the Get to Zero campaign to decriminalize HIV, to make sure that people who aren't afraid to go seek out that treatment. I think policies that are inclusive in terms of healthcare, that reduce barriers to affirming healthcare, regardless of who we are, that allow people to find the providers that can meet their needs, not just based on their specializations, but based on whole person healthcare, being able to meet each other together. Those types of policies are something that we are absolutely trying to forward here, and work with all the major medical groups, here, and many of them reaching down into the Chicago area. So that's really our big push right now is towards healthcare services.
Gotcha. No, that's great. And then Ms. Roxas, same question. Any successful policy initiatives that your organization has identified or are working towards regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion?
Yeah, so we work at the grassroots level, and we're kind of the liaisons between community and legislation. And one of the ones that we've been working with, the Good Food Purchasing Bill, bringing culturally relevant foods to Illinois institutions, as well as working on criminal justice work with us with prevention and intervention programs with our legislation. And uh, we have worked with the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation to help with them, and this has been like over 100-year struggle for them to gain their land back in DeKalb County. And so we've been helping with supporting them. They've done such a fabulous job with being able to have the state and federal acknowledge that the land is in that area is actually Prairie Band Potawatomi. And so Illinois, as of I believe just a few weeks ago, has its first reservation.
Oh wow, okay, that's really recent. Now that I did have one question, follow-up question. You mentioned getting culturally relevant food into institutions. Is that like with school systems? Is that with like what is that?
So the bill is broken out into several sections, but what the bill wants to do is dismantle this food purchasing with institutions such as the criminal justice systems, school systems, state buildings, all of those, to be able to change the narrative or change the practice of accepting the lowest bid for these food contracts, but being able to also balance, is it culturally relevant, and several other factors. Is it how harmful is it to the environment? Are these local foods? Are these organic foods? And so with my work with that is also ensuring that there's culturally relevant food for everyone in public institutions, including the public schools. Being able to not just Native American foods, but foods that are culturally relevant, to be able to contract with folks who can provide that, with farmers, with producers, with growers, to be able to provide that for our community here in Illinois.
Gotcha. No, thank you for elaborating. I would have never thought of cultural relevancy along with nutrition and health and environmental sustainability. So that's really interesting to hear. So within the past year, right, there was the Supreme Court decision that essentially regarding affirmative action, right, and essentially denoted that that's not something that we should be focusing on and making decisions and including people in institutions and schools and applications and things like of a similar nation. Nate, has the Supreme Court decision affected how your group or your role has been working towards diversity, equity, and inclusion? Have you had to take on different strategies or had to fight a little bit harder to say that this is something worth including in your day-to-day work? Representative Ford, if you could get us started.
Yeah, Janet, this is really popping up everywhere. So the Supreme Court decision has prompted the legislature. I chair higher ed appropriations, and in our public university space, we're concerned about the Supreme Court ruling. So it's prompted us to reassess our strategies and adopt approaches to make sure that we're compliant while also striving to meet the goals of DEI. So we are focused on finding innovative ways to continue promoting diversity and inclusion within the new legal framework. And so every now and then you hear this Supreme Court ruling popping up in more spaces than we expected to.
And if I could just have like a follow-up question to that, I know you said you're still trying to really focus on that. How do you communicate essentially that there are repercussions to not taking this into consideration as you're filling roles and hiring and staffing and all those items?
That's the I don't think right now the state is fully aware of repercussions. We know that right now the state and people and all over the country, businesses, it's unfortunate, but the safest way is to make sure that you stay away from it. And that's what's scary because people will not want to be innovative. They want to say it's easier to avoid any type of repercussion. So we're just going to make sure that we stay away from diversity and inclusion. And that's unfortunate.
Thank you. Honorable Larson, if you'd like to comment on any changes or pivoting you guys have had to do since this decision was made.
So we've turned a lot of our educational focus, and that's a big part of what we do is talk about cultural competency training and bring that to folks. So we've turned a lot of that focus to private business and to nonprofit organizations, and we're able to have an impact that way with the educational outreach and continue to bring that awareness to folks. We're fortunate we have a number of private universities here in Lake County, which don't necessarily have to follow those same rules because they have a difference in how they're funded. But with our local community college here at College of Lake County, we're starting to see some little changes, but I don't think they've really taken into effect, much like Representative Ford had mentioned. They don't really know what that impact looks like moving forward because there's so much lack of clarity around the impact of this ruling. I think we're kind of seeing what's happening in some other states where they've taken steps to roll these types of programs back intentionally. We haven't seen what happens in states like Illinois where we haven't taken steps to do that, what that impact will be. And so it's something we're definitely looking at, and we're going to, hopefully be prepared to react to in a positive way, and continue to advocate again for DEI programs everywhere we can.
Excellent, thank you. And then same question to you, Ms. Roxas.
Yeah, so from a not-for-profit perspective, we've really intensified our education, cultural competency work, DEI work to provide that, but also internally within the Native community, looking to projects and programs that help prepare our students for college. It was a struggle, and it continues to be a struggle even before this. And now with this changes, it's going to be even harder to get our youth ready to enter a space that was never meant for them. And so, finding those tools for them to prepare them to enter that.
That's great, thank you. I know Representative Ford, you might have to hop off around now. So I do want to pose one more question with you before you go. So in your experience, what is the best way to ensure that your community is included in policy, especially as a policymaker?
I think that not suppressing protests, making sure that you invite voices to be heard and not suppress it. So I encourage individuals to let their voices be heard. That's the only way you have the innovative change that's needed in society by people speaking up and speaking their passion. You know, just think about where we are today and the civil rights movements and the movements for women. And now you see the movements for trans gender people and gay and lesbian individuals, and just name it. It's because of protests. Nothing happens just because it's right. It's unfortunate, but right has to be fought for. So I appreciate the opportunity to have my voices heard. And when I say voices, I mean the 8th district.
Excellent. No, thank you so much. That's excellent. Yes, certainly. And yeah, feel free to drop off if you have to. Thank you so much for joining us today. But that is an excellent point, right? You know, I know a lot of people have issue with protest or how protests should be done, and if there's a right way to do it. And from what I have seen in my wise 30 years is that there's going to be someone who doesn't like the way you protest, no matter how nice or quiet it is. And you know, part of the reason protest is an aggravator word. But on that, Honorable Larson, if you'd like to comment at all on, you know, the value of something like protest in terms of you know, equity and inclusion and diversity, and what kind of a role it could play.
So protest has always been one of these ways that people who are traditionally marginalized or don't have a voice get the opportunity to raise their voices up and have people take notice. So regardless of whether it's, you know, indigenous peoples or it's Black or brown peoples, AAPI folks, or people within my own community, standing up and being in front of people and making people listen, making people hear those pleas for help, those demands for rights, those demands for equity and equality. Protest will always be a huge part of what we do. Um, you know, as an elected official, though, I really have to sit there and center that the fact that free speech is one of those foundations that we are built on. And so I have to agree with, you know, Representative Ford on this as well, that we should never be suppressing, you know, discourse. We should never be suppressing the voices of people. We may not always agree with them, but we need to hear what we don't agree about so that we can learn and we can grow and we can somehow find a way to come together and build those bridges.
No, absolutely. And Ms. Roxas, you know, same question, right? You know, how does protest or things more unconventional, you know, methods, you know, play into your fight for diversity, inclusion, and equity?
Yeah, you know, protest doesn't always have to be uh, in the streets, or you know what you typically think protesting could be. Protesting could be just your mere existence. You know, that is a form of protest. And I think importantly is being a good relative. So collaboration and being good relative, the supporting communities and causes that intersect with each other. Being able to, again, like I said, be a good relative.
You know, being a good relative, that's a really lovely way of putting that. It also brings me to my next question, which essentially, so as you know, there are, you know, more privileged groups, and essentially when you have more marginalized groups that say that they want this thing, you know, people have a tendency to be defensive or to not understand why their viewpoint can't just be accepted and kept as is. So what would what would you like to see from those outside of your diversity group um, do to advocate for you in political or community spaces? So, you know, once your voice is heard, how is it best amplified by those outside of your groups? Those relatives advocating essentially. And Ms. Roxas, if you'd like to start.
Sure. I think telling our story, retelling our story is a great way to be supportive outside of if you're not from that group, and also being able to and discerning when you should take that stance of um, maybe stepping back a bit, and when you should be going into spaces that you can go into but others can't. I think that's a struggle with DEI work also, is the discernment of when do I step forward, when do I step backwards, but it's all part of, you know, learning to be a good relative.
I'm sorry, I realized I'm muted. I was going to say I have a follow-up question on, you said it's difficult to discern when you should step forward or do that. Any advice you would have for somebody who wants to step forward and speak up on the best way to do that, or when is a good time to step back and to not intervene on that front?
So I think a lot of times with our community, with the Native community, people have very good intentions, and they'll want to uplift the Native community, but realizing that also within the Native community, as well as other communities of color, there are all different. We're just not one homogenous group. We are very much unique and very much different. And so, just asking that question, how can I help? How can I be of assistance? How can I be of service? And not in the way, instead of taking that initiative before asking. So I guess my answer would be ask first.
No, that's a great answer. Good advice in general. And Honorable Larson, similar question, how do you see those outside of your diversity group advocating for you in political and community spaces?
So I'm really going to piggyback off Gina's response about storytelling. It's something that I feel like Indigenous folks and the queer community share, is this history of telling stories and passing down things word of mouth, not written, not in traditional media that we see in Western cultures. So that storytelling is absolutely critical when we can share our stories with people outside of our circle and have them listen and really welcome those stories and then bring those to their community directly to be our mouthpiece in those places. It just furthers what we're doing because they're sharing these positive stories, or they're at least sharing these struggles that we're suffering through in a way that's engaging and encouraging. And it's not just that protest voice that we were talking about in the prior question, but it's really that compassionate feel, that energetic feel, that story feel that really conveys a different message. And it really helps to build support, and it helps to build those coalitions. And it really demonstrates we're not all that different as people. It really builds those bridges. And I think that's really critical to what we need to do.
Excellent, thank you. We do have an audience question that I would like to interject here. So what impact, if any, has a lack of inclusivity had on voting rights in your community? Ms. Roxas, if you can speak to that.
Sure. So like I had said, this is a 100-year anniversary of the Snyder Act. So that has impacted our voting rights, but even currently, our community, not here in Schaumburg, but the Native community in rural areas on reservations, some of our community members, we don't have a physical address. We have PO boxes. That's how our reservations are centered. And when it's time for voting and you need to register to vote, you're not usually able to use a PO box. So that's excluding a whole group of people who should be voting and not voting. And so I know state by state has changed rules, but I think on a federal level, just having that included in voting and in voting, the path to voting, to being a registered voter.
Yeah, having that be as something that's included, right? So it can be a PO box, it doesn't have to be a physical address. Which, as Honorable Larson mentioned, a lot of the things, our needs are in common, right? There's a huge population of homeless individuals who don't have an address, and they should be able to vote as well in their communities, whether or not they have that physical location. So that looks like another area of overlap, between these communities. So no, that's excellent. Thank you. And
You hit your mute again. Wait, you're muted.
Janet, you muted yourself
this
again.
is the second time. I'm sorry, guys. Essentially what I said, same question to you, Honorable Larson, impact on lack of inclusivity on voting rights. Thanks for catching me.
So I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, Janet, about unhomed folks within the queer and trans community specifically. It's almost a 500% higher rate of unhomed folks due to a lack of support from families. And we see a lot of that, especially with younger folks. So registering to vote is even one of the least things on most people's minds. They're worried about, where am I going to sleep? Where am I going to eat? How am I going to take care of myself? And so it's really hard to speak up and advocate for yourself in places like political arenas and to get your vote cast when you're worried about where your next meal is coming from. But I think even beyond that, um, we look at more so with the gender nonconforming folks within our community, is there's a real barrier when they go to see an election judge in person and they get, misgendered and they feel uncomfortable, or they have identification, their government name doesn't meet the name that they're using because they're still going through that legal process, or they can't find the $300 to $500 it takes to go through a legal name change because it's cost prohibitive. All of those are barriers to people feeling comfortable going into spaces to vote. We've made a lot of really great advancements here in Illinois with being able to do permanent vote by mail, by being able to remove some of those barriers and stigmas. But I still feel like there's a long way to go in some cases.
No, absolutely. I work as an election judge very often, and there have been really great strides in making sure things are accessible for people with visual or hearing disabilities. And I think that the Illinois ballot, at least where I'm at in Cook County, has more languages than I could count on my hands, which is great. But yeah, there are other things like that that you don't really consider, and that are a more human element, right? Of maybe even training for individuals like election judges and how to, um, they don't talk a lot about ensuring the comfort of the voters, just that people can vote. That's a really good point. Thank you. And I just muted myself again. So and my next question then, let's see. So I touched on this a little bit earlier with Representative Ford, but in terms of what would be long-term consequences of, ignoring the EDI needs of your communities? And long-term consequences, I don't just mean like from within your communities, but within the greater areas in which we live, by excluding individuals from your backgrounds. Honorable Larson, if you'd like to.
So I think there's a twofold issue here within the LGBTQ communities that I see every day, and that's, we need to really center our EDI efforts not just on, external forces, on groups that are outside of us, because that's a constant piece of the work that we do. It's that education and outreach to go, look, this is what queer identities look like. And they're not all that different, but let's just get that fundamental understanding and get away from labels. But we need to do that within our own community as well, because we see so often when there's polarizing conversation, when we see, extremely negative things from either side coming through, sometimes we need to recenter ourselves and go, no, we really need to, remember that there's some people out there that are maybe hurting in their own way and they have these negative opinions for a reason, or just like there's a label that one particular group might use to help marginalize us, we shouldn't do the same thing in response. We should use that as an opportunity to combat that marginalization of our labels, to embrace our labels, to embrace who we are, and to communicate, look, it's not that different. So I think that EDI work has to happen on all sides of the equation. It can't just be focusing on, here's who we are and accept us. It's, we need to understand those differences to build those bridges in the community.
Excellent, thank you. Same question to you, Ms. Roxas.
Yeah, I think for us, also for the Native community and other communities of color, is a loss of identity and a loss of culture, loss of tradition that can happen, within the Native community. Without this EDI work, we're continued to be not even acknowledged, non-existent. And if we're non-existent, are viewed as non-existent, lots of things can be taken from us. and that's with any culture, any group, any marginalized community. If you're not acknowledged, then what you have can be taken from you, which includes identity. But I also agree it's on both sides. On both sides, the EDI work has to happen, because even within the Native community, there's so many nuances and sub communities and just different tribal traditions and labels. Again, Native American, American Indian, what are we? Who are we? But nobody ever asked, what do you want to be called? I'd like to be called Potawatomi, and other people might have other labels or names. Again, the labeling and the naming. Instead of outsiders labeling us, maybe outsiders should ask what we would like to be labeled or called. And I think that goes with other communities as well.
Absolutely. Well said. Another audience question. So some societies do not have strict gender definitions like we do, or delineations, excuse me, like we do, such as a continuum. Would you like to see the United States move towards that? So that's a question from Renee. Thank you. Honorable Larson, if you'd like to start with that question.
So this is one from a personal standpoint I'm a little bit torn on. I spent the better part of 40 years being male and then went, oh, wow, I know better now. And so I want to embrace the other side of that because I really, it's the piece of binary I didn't personally have while I was growing up. But I also recognize how important it is to go beyond these simple genders. We understand gender is such a complex thing, as an incredible spectrum, and not just from 0 to 100. There's different levels of understanding of intensity of feeling a particular gender, not just the nature of the gender that you have. And in some cases, a term that's coming out a little bit more frequently, agender, or also neurogendered for people who experience life from a neurodivergent perspective, and gender doesn't even really equate for that. So I really think that, as we look at some of the feminist work that's been done in the past and some of that work for women's equality to break down barriers, it's a great start. And it's something that we should really focus on, is not worrying about the gender of who's doing what, and quit worrying about whether it's policeman or policewoman, and it's just a police officer or a firefighter or a mail carrier. Get rid of these gendered terms, these gendered concepts, and just open things up. I think last year, Equality Illinois hosts every year a Pride kickoff brunch for the Chicago Pride Parade for all the elected folks who are queer and their supporters. And so we were down there, and one of the new pieces of legislation that was being furthered in the state were these gender neutral multi-occupancy restrooms. And so we took over this place and we just said, yeah, every bathroom's gender neutral. We don't care. And it was so liberating to just walk in and nobody cared. And everybody accepted. And it wasn't even a thing. And I wish we could communicate those things a little bit better to go, look, we don't need to keep enforcing these rules. We're not protecting people. We're isolating them by keeping these gendered policies and rules in place. So while I really like being able to say personally, I like this gender and these identification markers that go with that and these traditional roles, at the same time, I understand the value of breaking all of those down, and feel like ultimately that's the right direction to move.
Thanks for sharing. And then I have another question from the audience for you, Ms. Roxas. Are there Native American tribes that do not want to participate in the democratic process, and why? I don't know if you can speak on that.
Well, I want to remind everyone, U.S. law is Native American law. The law has been the law that we are working under in Western U.S. Communities or civilization has been appropriated, utilized, whatever the term you want to say, with Native American law. And so I don't think there's any communities that would say they don't want to be part of the process, because again, U.S. law is Native law.
No, thank you for clarifying. And we have a question from one of our fellow league members. Kathy, thank you. So the League of Women Voters has a genuine interest in increasing the diversity of our membership, both to better inform or for policy decisions and advocacy to take advantage of the benefits of different voices. We have not been as successful as we would like. Do you have recommendations? And Ms. Roxas, if you could start.
Well, I think very interesting. Trickster Cultural Center and myself, we go wherever we're invited. I think just simply asking, and with a genuine ask of coming in and forming relationships. And I think it is a lot of relationship building, and it's sometimes it's hard work, and it's not always instantaneous, especially within the Native community. If the community is a closed community, because they have been exploited, they have been traumatized, and so it is. I acknowledge it is hard to gain trust in the Native community, but just keep asking, forming those relationships.
Excellent, thank you. Honorable Larson, same question. Do you give advice to the League of Women Voters on how to diversify our membership?
Yeah, I think Gina really summed that up very well because it really is that there's a lack of trust in a lot of cases. And so there's a lot of trust building that needs to take place. And it's not just as an organization going, hey, today we think we're going to include people a little bit better, so come join us. That doesn't work. In fact, we know that doesn't work within our own communities. And I see Gina's like smiling and nodding her head, like, yeah, you try and put 10 different bands of people within the same Potawatomi Nation together. Good luck with that alone. Try and get, gay men and lesbian women together. We have that same problem too. I get that. We feel it. Um, so the recommendations are really just to engage genuinely, engage in conversation, slowly build up that trust, build those relationships, because that's how you build memberships that are genuine. You build relationships that are genuine. Um, Take the time, invest, and do the work in that. And, we're open to that. It's also awkward for us to walk in because we feel like we're being brought in some cases to lend our equity to someone else. And so there does feel like that history of being exploited, as Gina was talking about, because we want to be diverse, but we also want our own voices to be our voices and not diluted by others. So, remembering that we're there and we're able to be part of that, but we also still have our own unique identities that really need to shine through is I think really critical and key.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for sharing. We'll take that to heart. I know we've got a couple of members in the audience, so thank you for sharing your insights. We do really appreciate it. But I want to turn the questions back to you guys. So at this point, as you've been doing this really great work within your communities and intersecting with other communities, how far along in the DEI greater journey do you feel your community is at? I know the finish line always feels really far away, but where do you feel that the next steps are at, in that journey? And Honorable Larson, if you could start for us.
Yes, thank you. I think this is one of these things where within our community, we are seeing huge setbacks nationwide. We have seen record numbers of anti-LGBTQ legislation get passed. We've seen most recently, one of the most critical blows we've seen is that within Division III college athletics, there was a blanket ban on transgender participation in athletics, which there are so many students who go to Division III school and they don't go to those schools for athletics. They literally cannot offer scholarships at that level. So it's students who just want an opportunity to participate. It's not even as competitive as we see at D1 levels. So we see all these new pushbacks and challenges coming towards us. So we have an immensely huge mountain to keep climbing. Every time we push and gain a little bit, we continue to fall backwards. I think we can take some solace in knowing that this feels very secular. Like we'll make gains and then we get a little pushback, and then we make gains and there's further pushback again. And it feels like it's a cycle. So I still see this light at the end of the tunnel. I see this hope for us that, we're in the middle of that pushback, but eventually we're going to get past that and we're going to move beyond it. And we're going to go, you know what? We were ultimately successful. I just know that journey is going to be a long time. And if it's like any journey, it may never actually see an end. It's just a continuous improvement and continuous path to follow.
Great, thank you. Same question to you, Ms. Roxas.
Yeah, so I wanted to echo Honorable Larson's remarks, and also take note that what we do and the work that I do with our organization and in a lot of Native communities and that are working on advocacy and DEI work, we take it, especially as an environmentalist, I use the term like we're planting seeds. So we're not expecting immediate change, although sometimes it's nice. But it's planting seeds and hoping in, down the road there's this beautiful flower that came to fruition from the work that we've done. And so hopefully, again, just working on planting those seeds and educating our youth so that it's again a better place than what we left it.
Thank you. So we are coming up on time. So I will leave you both with the same question that we left Representative Ford with before he left, which is, in your experience, what is the best way to ensure that your community is included in policy? Ms. Roxas, if you could answer.
Just remembering that we're still here, asking us for input.
Well said. And Honorable Larson, same question to you.
I couldn't have put it any better myself. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you both so much for joining us, and another thank you to Representative Ford for joining us as well. I am going to turn this back over to my co-lead Terry, and as well as one of our other members, Kathy Cortez, for some final remarks. Once again, Honorable Larson and Ms. Gina Roxas, thank you so much for speaking and sharing your perspectives today. We really appreciate it.
I'm not going to say a lot of words here. I am going to hand this over to Kathy Cortez, our president of the league. But I did want to make one comment, and I'll be brief, and that is your answers were amazing. This was a very interesting and what we like to do with our events, make sure that it's educational. And I'm sure that our audience learned a couple of things that they hadn't thought about before or have a new perspective on DEI. And I thank you for participating and joining us. And with that, Kathy, I'll hand it over.
Thanks, Terry. One, I want to voice my admiration for the amount of apparent patience that you have in working through the kind of challenges and discrimination in a way that you're able to remain positive and still look to the future. Patience, not one of the things I have been blessed with in my life. And so a bit to learn and take away from that. And also to echo what Terry said, in that your frankness and your honesty without being accusatory is so refreshing, and something I think that as much time I do a lot of work with the state league as well, and in terms of advocacy and working in Springfield and whatnot. And there are many, many days that I say to myself, why can't we just legislate through a lens of love and understanding and an embrace for our common humanity? And wouldn't life be simple if we could all do that? And that seems to be the grace with which our guests have taken on their challenges. And so I do appreciate your sharing everything with us tonight. And since you asked, I will make the ask that the league would love to have to have you be part of our organization and continue our learning and really help us to do the things that we want to do well. And so I appreciate your advice, and we'll be taking that to heart as we move forward. And any of the others of you who are online, also always welcome to join the League of Women Voters. I like to think that many of us are in a fight, all moving in the same direction, and we can always do more together. So thank you so much again for participating tonight. And with that, Janet, I'll leave it back over to you to just close out the session.
Yes, wonderful. Yes, thank you so much, Kathy, for the remarks. Thank you. I know we've been saying thank you all evening, but thank you so much, panelists, for joining us. And we have hit 8 o'clock. So thanks everybody for joining us on this Civic series. We are doing this the second Tuesday of each month. So if you're interested, also go look at the other lovely adult programs at the Schaumburg Library. And we'll be excited to see you guys next time.